Hey everyone. Today I want to start a series on modeling a 3D diorama of the volcano eruption at Pompeii. And what we'll do in today's video is what you see on screen right now. We are in Reality Composer Pro, and we have terrain geometry of Mount Vesuvius and the area where Pompeii was, and we have some materials assigned to this terrain, and it's all rendering in Reality Composer Pro. And what we're going to do today is we're going to work mainly in Houdini to actually create this geometry and the materials. And the focus is really going to be on the USD interoperability between Houdini and Reality Composer Pro, because we need to make sure that everything translates nicely to Reality Composer Pro so that it renders in the way we expect it to. So let's begin by taking a look at where we actually get our data from. The Italian government has this website where you can download terrain data. And we're going to go down here and we can download this. I've already downloaded this data, and we can go to Houdini now. And in our root project folder, I have map data over here. And this is essentially what we downloaded from the website. There's some README with some information, and there's this file, which is in the TIFF format. And this contains all of the height data of the terrain. It's called a digital environment map, a DEM. So to begin modeling our terrain, the first thing we're going to do at the object level is create a node. And we're just going to create some geometry, and we'll call this terrain geo. And in this terrain geo, we are going to create a height field file node. And we can see that it imported here. Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, nice. We can see that we have this height field here. So now what we can do is we can choose a file path, and we can go to map data, and we can select our TIFF file that we've downloaded. And then what we have to do is we have to go to size method and set this to grid spacing. And once we do that, everything should look right. And you can see that we have this beautiful terrain now as a height field in Houdini, with Mount Vesuvius right here and the surrounding area. So once we have this, we can add a height field crop node. And the reason we need a height field crop node is that this terrain is simply too big. We want to make it smaller, and we just want to focus on it. We want to cut out a smaller piece of this mesh. So what we can do is we can set the display flag here, and we can go to we can select the transform tool in the right, and we can basically create the bounding box of the terrain that we ultimately want to export. So let me just move around here a little bit more. And we can pull this in. We can pull this side in as well a little bit. And nice. Now we have this section cropped out. Now, what we can do from here, we can go and add a convert height field node. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually set the density to 0.1. So we scale down the geometry a little bit. And if we go on the information section, we can see that we have 260,000 vertices now. That might be a little bit too big, but for now, we can work with this. So we'll have to think about optimizing this mesh at a later time. Once we have that, we can add a smooth node. Let's connect that. And now what we can do is we can add a match size node. And this node will allow us to reposition the terrain. We can set the justify Y to min, which will raise up our terrain. And we can select scale to fit. And then since we're scaling it down to the target size of 1 right now, we can go to the viewport and we can press spacebar Z and then A, which will center everything. Okay, now that we're here, we can go and we can create a terrain, a null node, and we can set, we can call this node terrain geo out. Okay, now let's create a material, and for that we want to create a texture that has a different color value from black to orange based on the height value. So to do that, let's add a new node, a new null node, and connect the height. Actually, let's connect the height field crops output too. And we're going to call this basically terrain cop. And this, let's set the display flag on that. And we can go back and hit spacebar ZA. So we'll zoom in, or rather zoom out to the native scale again. And besides that, let's create a cop network. And let's select cop network old. And the reason is that the new cop network, I just haven't figured out how to create the material there yet. So in this network, in this cop network, we can import our geometry. And to do so, let's reference our terrain cop that we just created. And we want to set the resolution and planes based on the SOP. Once we have that, we can create actually, what we want to do is we also want to remap the range from 0 to 1. And now you can see that we have various color values, which are remapped from 0 to 1. So we can see this kind of grayscale height map. Then we can add a delete node. And this delete node, we're going to use to isolate the height channel or the height plane. So we can set non-scope planes and components, and we can set this to height. So we now have the height isolated. Then we can create a VOP cop filter. And let's connect the input into here. And in here, what we want to do is we want to create a binding to our height, which we can then remap using a ramp parameter. So we'll do that. And then in this ramp, we need an RGB color ramp. And we want this to be linear. So to connect our ramp to our output, we need to convert it from a vector to float. And we can do that with the vector to float node, and then we'll connect the outputs to the red, green, and blue color channels. And once we do that, we can go up back to our cop network, and we can set up here, we can change the color from black to orange. And now we can see that we have this texture right here with a color from black to orange. And then the last thing we need to do is we just need to create a ROP network, ROP file output, excuse me. And we can connect the orange texture to this. And let's just call it, let's do it under the render path directory, and we'll just call it orange texture. Cool. And then we can just say render current frame, and let's render this. Amazing. Now, let's go to our geometry layer and let's select terrain geo out again. And I'm going to go spacebar ZA again to get back to our unit scale. And now we can go to the stage area. So we're leaving the object area and we're going to the stage. And this is where we're going to combine the terrain and the materials by using a Material X shader, which we can then export with a USD file to import into RealityKit. So what we need to do, I'm just going to go to desktop and select Solaris. And now we can create a SOP import. And that SOP import should reference our terrain geo out. Beautiful. So we see the geometry in the viewport here. And from here, we actually also want to update the import path prefix. And we're going to just call this terrain. And what this does, it on the left here in the USD hierarchy, you can see that it now called our kind of root prim terrain. So now we can create a material library. And let's set the display flag here. And in this material library, what we want to do is we want to create a Material X builder, which will create this Material X material. And once we go into this material, we simply want to create a material, what's it called? It is called an image, a material image. We can take this material image and we can set a file path. And we want to go to our render output from earlier and take the orange texture. And this orange texture, once we accept that, we can connect that output to the base color. So we're now setting the texture as the base color of this shader. Now in the material library, let's go back to the stage area. And now what we need to do is we need to select assign to geometry. And we want to, first of all, we want to connect, we want to take our Material X material here, and we just need to set that as the material path and as the material VOP. And then we can drag our terrain into the geometry path, and that will assign the material to our terrain now. Beautiful. So now we have this, and as a matter of fact, actually, let's assign this to, let's do this terrain materials. No, never mind. Let us put that under terrain. And now what we want to do is we want to actually up here under material, under the material path prefix, we want to set this to be terrain/materials. And now we can see that it's all grouped under the terrain, and we have the height and we have the materials. So the last thing we need to do is we need to create a USD ROP node. And in here, we need to select the save style, and we need to basically say flatten stage. And once we've done that, we can just say we want to call this terrain USD, and we save it to disk. And that writes our USD file, including our materials, to disk. And we can go to Reality Composer Pro, and we can go to Finder, and we see that we have our terrain.usd file here, which we can now drag. We could drag it into here. And let's just reset this. And the last thing we need to do is we need to update. Let's close this and reopen it. And now we see that we have our terrain that we just created with the material X material in Reality Composer Pro. And from here on out, we can improve on the materials, we can improve on the geometry, and we can start to build it out. But we now have this pipeline working from Houdini to Reality Composer Pro, which is really powerful. So I'll see you in the next video. And if you want to follow along, subscribe. Until then.